What is your sex ed horror story? I was filling in for the 9th grade life skills teacher while she was at an appointment, and she left a chart for the kids to fill in with different birth control methods, their percent effectiveness, any side effects. I'm at the front of the room leading the discussion with the info they need to fill in their charts. The last method on the chart was abstinence. I said there are no side effects. One of the freshman boys raised his hand and said, I know a side effect of abstinence is a carpal tunnel. I couldn't even pretend that it was inappropriate. I laughed as hard as the kids did. Not a horror story. But I got detention for asking if you have crabs and scabies at the same time, do they fight? Not horrible. But we were supposed to play a health Jeopardy game, but the teacher accidentally chose our SX positions 1. Split us up into boys and girls, with the girls going off into another room for instruction. And 2 teachers screamed at us for what must have been 20 minutes that if anyone laughed or made a joke we would be suspended. Nice intro. Thanks. We did a thing in 9th grade where anyone could write down a question anonymously. One was about average penis size. This was in the early 90s. So that wasn't something we could just Google. The SX Ed teacher, who was highly trained at coaching football but probably not at SX Ed, told us between 7 and 9 inches. Probably every guy nervously glanced around the room and tried to put in their sure. That sounds about right face. I was convinced for about a year that I had a micropenis. There was a kid in class who raised his hand and asked, what's it called when girls spray out that liquid during sex? The teacher responded, girls don't do that. He said, trust me, it's real. I've seen it a bunch of times in videos. She never responded. That was 6th grade. Student in 5th grade asked at what age males grow a penis. 5th grade. They separated the boys and girls into 2 classrooms. They must have thought the boys were too young to need any sex ed, late 1980s. So we were read a short story, Ray Bradbury's A Sound of Thunder, where they go back in time to kill a dinosaur, by the school principal, a man. In the classroom with the girls. They papered over all the windows and had a teacher standing guard outside. The girls must have gotten the straight truth from our cranky female teacher about how they were all about to have their periods. Get boobs. Grow pubes. Needing deodorant for body odor. Everything. This was probably the first time many had heard some of this stuff. Because when the boys came back into the room, all the girls were shell-shocked. Some were crying. I asked the girl who sat next to me, what story did your class read? In 6th grade. I had honest to God never heard the word masturbate before in my life. The teacher was explaining stuff, or maybe it was a video about safe sex or abstinence. I can't recall which. But the word came up and nothing explained what it meant. I asked what is masturbation? And an awkward silence fell over everything. Maybe because the teacher, a man, thought I was joking or trying to be funny. He slowly realized I was serious and then struggled so hard to explain it appropriately. It's when, you know, you do things to feel good with yourself. You touch things and I felt terrible for asking. To this day, I don't know who was more embarrassed. Me, the teacher, or everyone else. A teacher asked the class, who can name a part of the male reproductive anatomy? And this one kind answered with full confidence. A vagina. Edit. Wow, holy shit, this blew up. One kid in my class asked if you could get STDs from having sex with a chicken. Kind of put him on the spot and was a little suspicious. Not really a horror story. In high school SX Ed, our teacher had a big section on condoms, which culminated with the class betting on how stretchy they were to prove that no one should accept the I'm too big for them excuse. Well, one air pump and one condom later, we had our answer at about the size of a long watermelon. As our teacher was going to try to pop it, to prove they tough, our principal was doing his rounds and opened the door. Saw our teacher smacking the out of an inflated condom and just backed away slowly. I found it hilarious. 9th grade SX Ed. Teacher got a wooden penis to show how to put on a condom and the condom ripped in front of everyone. And our teacher said, "In my 27 years of living, I have never seen a condom rip," and someone in the back of class said, "Damn." This isn't too much of a horror story but more of a moment that made me queasy. First, when discussing testicular cancer, they showed us a video of the skinny ginger guy in the shower feeling up his balls to check for tumors. And they gave us this fake nutsack to pass around and feel. It was pretty lifelike and you could squeeze the balls and they'd kind of pop slide around the sack. All I could think of was doing that to my own sack and it just made me feel uneasy. The whole experience was just awful. That's pretty amazing that they're teaching that. I wish they did this for girls. Everyone always tells you as a woman to regularly check your boobs for lumps and whatnot. But you have no clue what that lump might actually feel like. And because of hormones and periods, breasts change constantly. And when you're younger, breast tissue is quite dense anyways, so yeah, you might do a check regularly. But you don't really know what you're supposed to feel when you feel a bump and stuff. I would love to have something like that but for boobs. We watched a video that tried to be hip and cool about sex ed and puberty. Direct quote. "During puberty, a woman's hips and breasts grow. Insert poorly done animation of a girl's hips and breasts enlarging to ridiculous sizes. No. Not that big." Probably 9 or 10 years old. Mid-1980s. Sex ed was taught at an after-school event that lasted about a week. My mom and I and my best friend and her mom went. There were 2 rooms. Girls and their moms in one room and boys and their dads in the next room over. We learned basic stuff mostly about anatomy. Slides were shown. Probably dating from the 1950s. Awkward. Then at one point, the male teacher came over and asked for a few of the moms to come next door to help with something. My imagination went wild. Especially since my mom went with the man. I thought for sure that she and the other mom who went were being forced to show a live demo of what their boobs looked like, or worse, even though I didn't know what worse was yet. They were in there for what seemed forever. What were they doing to our moms? How is my mom going to explain this to my dad when we get home? Why is nobody alarmed? Because they were moving desks. My friend's mom bought a Eszel reproductive pop-up book. It covered both male and female. So you would open it up and the uterus and fallopian tubes would pop up at your face. You can only imagine the fun we had with that. Is that an opened sex ed pop-up book in your pants, or are you happy to see me? We played STD in a cup. Everyone gets a cup of water. 1 cup of water has a bunch of dissolved starch in it, the STD. We went around swapping fluids to represent sex. And we're supposed to see if we could safely avoid STDs without protection, swapping fluids. At the end, we find out who had the STD by dropping iodine into each cup, turning the starch blue. If it turned blue, you tested positive. Everyone in the class ended up with the STD. Even me. Because even though I only had one partner, and they had only had one before me, the one before them was a sleuth and had everybody's fluids. Honestly, a very good exercise and warning. Except for that one kid. At the end, he dumped his test results and refilled his cup at the bubbler in order to claim he didn't have the STD. And he was good for more fluid swapping. Honestly, another good lesson on assholes who will lie about being clean. Use protection. Kids. Being singled out by the teacher because I had a unique name for a scenario along with a boy who I didn't like. She used our names in a scenario talking about how a relationship develops. We had to stand in front of the class while she described random scenarios where we might end up having unprotected sex. And why it was bad. I was not attracted to this boy. And I'm sure he wasn't attracted to me either. Hearing her talking about us having sex was nightmarish. That's ridiculously inappropriate. You can say person A and person B. Not hey. You kids. 6th grade sex ed, at the end of the class. The teacher opened the floor for questions. She said we could ask anything as long as it was a serious question. The only question I remember is when a kid, male, asked, "It's okay to have sex with your sister, right?" Full stop. Haha, I asked what oral sex was and my teacher said, "You know what sex is? You know what oral means? Figure it out." I did not figure it out. I thought oral only meant oral presentation as in speaking and figured it was sex where you talked a lot. My sex ed teacher brought a kid up to the front of the classroom wearing a shirt that had 2 long sleeves and explained what an uncircumcised penis looked like. Teacher hit a girl in the face with a DLDO. We did not learn how to put on condoms that year. Come again? It was taught by a Jesuit monk whose English language skills were Latin, and by the end, 1 hour class total, I sometimes couldn't even identify which sex the diagrams were showing. It was all line diagrams. All medical terms. Close bracket. Father Bertoli thought it went well. Anyway. My mom's the sex ed teacher. In 6th grade I learned the term popping your cherry from some friends in sex ed class. I went home with this newly found knowledge and accused my older sister of having her cherry popped. She broke out in tears and my mom grounded me for a week. More of a lack of sex ed horror story, and thankfully short. A guy who I had a crush on, both of us seniors, pulled me aside one day and asks, "So when a girl has her period she just lays an egg in the toilet, right?" I'll be honest. I'm not sure if I answered him or just stared at him. In my school sex ed was co-ed until gender specific issues came up. So when it came time to learn how to self-check for cancers we split into groups. When we were sent away to watch a film on testicular cancer, I said, "Alright fellas, let's watch the ball game," and got detention. I still think it was a grade A joke. Edit. Holy, this blew up overnight. Thanks for my first Reddit awards. Got it too late. It caused a lot of stress when we found out we were using birth control pills wrong. 9th grade health with MR. Lamb. Dude was an absolute gem of a human being. But his voice sounded exactly like Barry White. Like all the time. So anytime he tried to say anything remotely sexual, it sounded like the voiceover for a raunchy R&B song. Which made the freshmen erupt in laughter. Constantly. Poor guy just couldn't get through a lesson for 3 straight weeks. Mine was basically, if you have sex you're gonna get diseases. Get pregnant and die. I was scared to have sex for a long time. A horror story in terms of education. In grade 9, we were given a paper that had an equation that said having safe, protected sex was equal to Satan. It went, condoms and birth control lead to premarital sex and sex without the intention of procreation. Premarital sex and sex without the intent to have children is a sin. Choosing to be sinful is the job of Satan. Condoms equals Satan. Needless to say, we had a lot of pregnant girls in our graduating year. In elementary school, the boys in my class watched this generic boys puberty education video as normal. Also as normal, it touched on the male genitals and erections. After the whole thing ended, we then asked the teacher questions about anything in the video. And I decided to ask, when you get an erection, is there a bone that goes into the penis? The only thing I remember from sex ed which was taught by the creepy lunch lady. Lunch lady unrolls a condom and stretches it as far as she could. Then she says, "I know none of you are this big, so this will fit any of you." Edit. I get it. Most of you on Reddit have above average units. There is an appropriately sized raincoat for you too. No. One size does not fit all. Find one that fits you. They exist. This was a co-ed class of around 200. I have no idea why the lunch lady was teaching this. She didn't teach anything else. The responses were pretty much the same as what you see in this thread. The room erupted and nobody really listened to anything else she said. My sex ed was a series of books on cassette tapes from some Christian organization my dad made me listen to in the car with him one awkward summer day. Suffice to say, my actual sexual education came courtesy of one insanely understanding young lady from the Craigslist dating section. Our first night together she just said, "Wow. You really have no idea what's up, do you?" And proceeded to walk me through for a few hours. Honestly, hats off to that woman. Because there's no way I was good at anything. But she invited me over a few more times after that. And even though we never so much as actually dated, I still regard her with a massively fond respect. Unintentional sex ed happened for me in 4th grade. In an assignment we had to invent a new town relating to the gold rush. I named it KPRN. And I thought I just made a new word, did not know what PRN was. My imagination sucks and the town name was similar to a name I recently heard, Cape Horn. We had to give a reason for the name and my unimaginative mind said they didn't know why. A teacher-parent conference later I was confused why they were asking me about the word PRN and if I knew what it meant. Zero explanation on their end. So curiosity hits me and I Google PRN. That's how my 4th grade teacher introduced me to online pornography and wanking. Edit. My first post comment that received some attention. Catholic middle school. In 8th grade they made us watch a video that was basically don't have sex or you'll die. The woman speaking in the video literally said she could tell if a girl has had sex or not by looking into her eyes and gazing into her spirit. Aside from basic biology and anatomy. That was the only formal sex ed that I received in school. That's horrifying. My health teacher in high school told us condoms are strong and they are very stretchy. Don't believe any guy who goes "I'm too big. It won't fit all this or it's just gonna break anyways. Why bother putting one on?" She then produced 3 condoms available for pickup in the health office. Proceeded to pull one over her hand and up past her elbow on her arm like it was a fancy costume glove. Spread her fingers out as wide as they can go. Stretched 2 remaining of said condoms over her cowboy boots. And walked around non-stop for over 6 hours before one of them broke. Not necessarily a horror story. But that will haunt my dreams forever, Mayo. Edit. Holy, this blew up. Thank you for the awards and all your hilarious responses. Double edit. I know that condoms can be too tight for comfort and can restrict blood flow. Which is why they come in different sizes. Quit trying to flex on your dick size, lol. Story from my mom. She taught a middle school special ed class. Her and a male colleague handled sex ed. Her first year on the job. They passed around a box so that students could write questions anonymously. The male teacher pulled a question and said he couldn't answer. Mom, wanting to be helpful, asked if it was a female question. The male teacher tried to warn her. The question was, what does cum taste like? My mom was so dedicated to educating these kids that she launched into a hypothetical discussion about how most body fluids have a high salt content. So it might take salty. The boy who wrote the question could not contain himself and blurted, "My girlfriend said it tastes like gummy bears. My mother never ate a gummy bear again." Edit. Thanks. My first awards and it's a story like this. Lol. Welcome to Reddit. It doesn't taste like gummy bears. 2 interns were teaching us, 7th grade, about HIV. Interns. So, you can catch it by oral, vaginal and an LSX. That guy in the back. What about nasal SX? Everybody. Shut up. Diego. Interns. Well. Our sex ed teacher told us that girls who had sex before marriage were like chewed pieces of gum. Our teacher compared them to used up tape. A friend of mine almost started puking during sex ed when we were watching a movie about childbirth in class. It wasn't very explicit but the blood was enough to get him as pale as the wall. 6th grade sex ed class. I was pretty sheltered and did not get internet until I was 18, so I was pretty in the dark compared to most kids my age. The teacher said it's totally normal to masturbate. I was sitting next to this kid and whispered, "What does that mean?" He full well knew what it meant but he's like, "IDK, you should ask." My dumbass raised my hand and straight up asked what masturbation was and everyone started laughing so hard at me. To get the attention off of me, the kid next to me pointed to some poor kid in my class and was like, "Look. He's doing it right now. I was like, what's he doing? Class got pretty out of control. I still went home that day and had no clue what it meant. I was in health class and there was this kid named Jordan. Jordan was dumb as. Our gym teacher toughed our sex ed class. He was a no bull kinda guy and he dealt with his fare of bull from Jordan. He does the classic "there are no stupid questions here" spiel. Well, Jordan, after hearing this, raises his hand with full enthusiasm. He goes, "MR. Sometimes if I squeeze my nipples really hard, like I mean really hard, a tiny drop of milk will come out. Is this normal?" Our gym teacher just sort of looked at him in disbelief. But Jordan was full on serious. Our gym teacher goes, "You know when I said there are no stupid questions? Well, I was wrong. Stop squeezing your nipples, Jordan." My ex's roommate in Bible college was part of a group that traveled for skits and sang songs to schools and youth groups about abstinence. She was asked to sit out when her baby bump started to show. She swore she had never done it. Her boyfriend swore as well and he was a virgin. Turns out she let her previous boyfriend do things. So she and her old boyfriend got a shotgun wedding before their kid was born. She was lecturing kids and had no idea what sex was. She was told babies come from semen. So she just thought sailors, seaman, were part of the process. Not really a horror story. Rather a hilarious one. Catholic school sex ed and they break up girls and guys into 2 rooms. Nun teaching the girls and a priest teaching the boys. Honestly, probably more informative than my friends who went to public school. Taught about abstinence as well as condoms and whatnot. Anyways, the priest talks to us about masturbation and I'll never forget his line. Masturbation is perfectly normal. In fact, 95% of men admit to doing it one time or the other. The other 5% are liars. Having a chastity seminar by Jason Evert and hearing him brag about how girls would tell him that he changed their life and would rip off their Playboy bunny necklaces. My sex ed teacher, a short frizzy-haired shrill woman, would tell us all about her own sex life in class. Oh yeah. Got to hear about her husband bending her over the stair railing and giving it to her. Or about that time on the kitchen table. Or that time on the living room floor where she got rug burn. There were a few others. But, yeah. I didn't know what sex was at the time it was taught. But apparently, my whole class knew. So when it was being taught, I couldn't understand it and asked a lot of inquiries. Then I started to notice that my class was starting to stare. Teacher passed out candy, then explained that the candy was our abstinence and once you eat the candy you don't have it anymore, blah blah blah, conservative, don't have sex. The point is my friend and I got sent to the office for moaning loudly while eating M&Ms. Not a horror story but a funny one. We had sex ed in 10th grade. For some unknown reason. And a classmate of mine was barely paying attention. Someone asked why you can't pee and ejaculate at the same time and my teacher explained and this guy just goes, "Wait, I can pee while I have a boner. Am I a medical marvel?" I have not let him forget it. I grew up in the American South, where sex was such a taboo that the class wasn't allowed to be called sex ed. We had to call it your adult body. The class was completely about puberty and childbirth. Because any mention of sex was deemed too upsetting for young people. We learned that condoms and birth control was a thing. And the general idea of how it might work. But nothing else. We were never taught how to use a condom. How to get birth control. Or how to know what an STD might look like. It wasn't surprising when we had a really high pregnancy rate in our school. I guess the true horror was being left unprepared. When I got to college, I fell in love and had sex for the first time. Due to being taught that anyone who has sex is dirty and less of a person. I had a lot of anxiety and felt like I would be abandoned. Sex ed shouldn't be abstinence only education. 4th grade. First sex ed class. Teacher was known to be gay. But in the closet. He had one of those walrus mustaches. And was the band teacher. The first time he said penis, all of the boys kind of snickered. He said it again. And we giggled. The next time he said it, several burst out laughing. So, in his infinite wisdom, the teacher just started saying, penis, 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 penis. We were rolling on the floor laughing for 15 minutes while he just kept saying penis over and over again. Penis, 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 full stop, semicolon. Finally we calmed down somewhat until he said Vagina. Not necessarily sex ed. But I worked with a couple who was dating and they didn't think they'd get pregnant because they didn't want to. For context, these are uber religious types, but apparently not religious enough lol, who assumed that God wanted them to be happy and wouldn't give them a child until after they were married. Huh. So they have a kid now.